Okay. I'll wait a minute for, did she go to the restroom? Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start and read my thing. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start and read my thing. Okay. Okay, now I muted YouTube. That's what y'all heard. Well, welcome. It is September and we're here for another Legacies and lunch. Let me get a little discombobulated today. Okay. Here we go, everybody. Feel like we're back at the beginning of the pandemic and I was saying, here we go all the time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the September 2021 Legacies and Lunch, a program of the Cowles Butler Center for Arkansas Studies. I'm Heather Register Zabindin, Outreach Coordinator for the Bobby L. Roberts Library of Arkansas History and Art. The Roberts Library houses the galleries and bookstore at Library Square, the Butler Center for Arkansas Studies, and the Encyclopedia of Arkansas. The Roberts Library Research Room is open Tuesday through Friday from 10 until 5, and we're open on select Saturdays, and this month's bonus Saturdays are September 11th and September 25th from noon until 4. So please come and join us any day, but particularly those Saturdays, and get our expert help with your genealogy and your Arkansas history questions. Go to robertslibrary.org for all the specifics before you plan your visit. This program is being live streamed to YouTube and will be available to view on Cowles' YouTube channel immediately following the program. The speakers will answer questions at the end of the session, so please type your questions in the chat box in Zoom. So now for today's program. This month we have Carla Coleman, along with Rhonda Stewart, to talk about cemetery preservation and commemoration, particularly Oakland Fraternal Cemetery here in Little Rock. Carla serves by appointment of the governor as chairman of the Black History Commission of Arkansas, and she is also the chairperson of the City of Little Rock's Oakland Fraternal Cemetery Park Board and a charter member of the Afro-American Genealogical and Historical Society, the Arkansas chapter. Rhonda Stewart, many of you know, is an employee here at the Roberts Library, part of the Butler Center, and she is a genealogy and local history specialist. I like to call her an expert. She always corrects me, so I'm going to go with specialist this time. So when you come to the Roberts Library, Rhonda's most likely the face you're going to see. She's going to be the one answering all of your genealogy questions. So everyone, please give a warm virtual welcome to Carla and Rhonda. Okay, you're unmuted now. Yay.
Hi, Rhonda.
Hi, Carla.
Thank you for the invite. Hello, Heather. Today we're going to talk about the meaning of why we should commemorate African-American cemeteries and burial grounds. Right. So first off, we're going to talk about commemorate. What is the meaning of commemorate?
Skip one.
Oh. Okay, so that's 2, so 3. All right. So when we commemorate, we in the African term, there's a celebration called Sankofa, And Sankofa is a word in the Akantua, I think, Fanta languages of Ghana that translates to retreat and also refers to the Bono Adinkra symbol, represented either with a symbolized heart shape or by a bird with its head turned backwards while its feet face forward, carrying a precious egg in its mouth. Sankofa is often associated with the proverb, "It is not wrong to go back for that which you have forgotten." It implores for Africans to reach back into ancient history for traditions and customs that have been left behind.
And in a sense, we do that anyway, just by visiting our cemeteries. When you visit a cemetery, you're going back to retrieve the history, most times, of your family members.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mhm. So then commemorate, when we use it as a verb, it is to recall and show respect for someone or something.
Forgive me. A wreath laying ceremony to commemorate the war dead. Synonyms: keep alive, keep going, keep in existence, preserve, conserve, sustain, maintain, continue, extend, carry on, keep up, cause to continue, prolong, immortalize, memorialize, eternalize, eternity.
So with these words, we hope that we give you enough and that you've been hearing these words when we talk about commemorate and why we go to the cemetery. Now, there are other synonyms that refer to commemorate, is to pay tribute to, pay homage. And you'll always hear that when we pay homage to our ancestors, to honor and salute, to toast, to remember, acknowledge, observe, keep alive the memory of. And that's what we do. That's the main reason, don't you think, Rhonda, that when we bury, in our cemeteries?
Right. And some people do it simply by driving by a cemetery. Others will visit a cemetery and go to a specific marker or grave and leave a homage or a gift. Sometimes we do it simply by directing someone to that cemetery. Here at the Butler Center, we get calls all the time about cemeteries. And yes, just yesterday, I had a lady in Malvern, Arkansas, that was calling about OaklandFraternal Cemetery and looking for someone that was buried there, possibly buried there. We narrowed it down to a clue that made it very possible that was the person she was looking for. So even when there is no marker for the person you're looking for that was buried, there are other ways to decide whether or not the possibility of that person you're looking for is buried at that particular cemetery. So there are lots of records that we can go through to verify what's actually in that cemetery.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to talk about conservation again, because conservation and preservation, and these are the things that you want to do in order to keep our cemeteries. It's a cultural heritage, the interdisciplinary study of care and protection of art, architecture, and cultural works. So what is that in a cemetery? What are the markers? Their architecture, their art, and other cultural works. So in African-American cemeteries, you may not see these big monuments, but there's always some type of a marker. A friend found one, and coming from other states in migration, glass,
Right.
rocks. What else do? They leave little symbols. Sometimes if it was a favorite teacup or coffee cup, they leave these things at the grave site. So that's why it's important not to remove things, but to conserve and keep things. So it's the preservation and reconditioning and restoration of works of art, the act or process of conserving and maintenance of a physical quantity, such as energy or mass during the physical or chemical change.
And doing the conservation, also, when you're conserving, whatever your talent is in life, you can use it in a cemetery. If you're an artist, you can use it in a cemetery. If you like to do lawn work, lawn care, gardening, you can do that in a cemetery. So you can assist in the conservation of any cemetery near you or cemetery specific to your family. The goal is to make sure that those cemeteries are conserved and that we honor those people that came before us, because without them, there'd be no us. So we really want to conserve what we have and document the people that are there in the cemetery. Plus, for instance, Parkview does the Tales from the Crypt every year. COVID interrupted maybe, but prior to COVID, that was one of the largest events in the city of Little Rock, because they reconstructed the lives of some of the people buried in that cemetery, and that led to some more conservation in that cemetery because it drew funds for the cemetery. So there are all kinds of ways that you can participate in the conservation of a cemetery.
Right. That's why we ask people not to put extra plants that are invasive or not natural, to the state or the area, because it'll take over. Because who would want to put, what is that, kudzu in a cemetery? It would cover up everything. So that's why, Rhonda and I, even though we're on the cemetery board, we always hear about conservation and preservation and where are my people?
Right.
Okay.
The main things. The act of or a process of preserving or keeping a cemetery, the state of Arkansas, the state of being preserved or kept from injury, destruction or decay, security, safety, preservation of life, fruit, game, etc. Picture good preservation. And just preserving. If you think about Central High School, that school, if it had not been preserved as long as it was, we would not have the National Historic Site that we have today. Dunbar, if it had not been preserved as it was, we would not have that school today. So cemeteries are just as important as some of our major buildings in the nation. A cemetery has life to it. That's and right. You can uncover the life that's in a cemetery simply by walking the rows of graves, by noticing who's there. If you go to Oakland, Fraternal, or any of the 7 cemeteries in that area, you will find connections not only to your life, but to the life of the city, the community itself. It is a good example of who was in that community and what they were doing at the time of their life. And just like you live from one moment to the next and that dash in between, the dash that was preserved in that cemetery is the life of so many different people that had an impact on how we live today and what we're experiencing and how we're enjoying the city of Little Rock.
That's right. They were the shoulders that we stand on today.
Correct.
So a graveyard, you have all these different names and what we call them. And we hear a lot, like what's the term? What makes a graveyard a burial ground or a churchyard? So a graveyard is a burial ground, especially one beside a church. And a burial ground, an area of ground set aside for the burying of human bodies.
A churchyard is an enclosed area surrounding a church, especially as used for human burials. A cemetery is a burial ground. Gravesite or graveyard is a place where the remains of dead people are buried or otherwise interred. That means cremation. The word cemetery implies that the land is specifically for human burials. So cemetery is an important term.
That's right. So we have human burial grounds and we have pet. So that means that if you're buried there, don't bring your pet out to be buried in a human burial ground, or don't bring your cremains, because they're legal things and you don't want to.
You just can't scatter your ashes in any cemetery.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Health reasons and other reasons. You can't do that. So you have to follow the rules and the guidelines. And each state has rules and guidelines for what can be done in an area where you're burying bodies.
Mm-hmm. So an interesting fact that I found while doing some research on the 6th of June in 1919 was an act that that was introduced, and it said the act may be cited as the Burial Grounds Act, number 2, the Burial Grounds Act. It shall not be lawful to bury the dead in any place not being a licensed burial ground. And any person who buries any body or in any act, any wise act of assist to the burial of any body in any place not being a licensed burial ground is liable to a fine of $1,000.
That's why you can't bury your cousin in your backyard.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because we do see, we get a lot of requests and questions about a burial ground. Right. So even though it's not licensed, and there are very few state governed cemeteries in the state, so churches do have them, and then families do have them, but it's a plot of ground that's specifically for those burial grounds. So a cemetery is a cemetery, I'd like to say. Right. Mm-hmm. All right, now this is the gate entrance of Fraternal. And even though it says Oakland and Fraternal, it is, Fraternal has its own entrance and its own land plot. So it was established in 1888. It is west of Barber Street on 21st, and 22 colored lodges got together, and let me see, the United Odd Fellows and the Benevolent Societies went to the city and asked for a proper place to bury. And these Masonic orders or benevolent societies were given 14.4 acres. And it is on the west side of Barber Street. So before 1973, Fraternal had no source of income, unlike Oakland Cemetery, because these, this was the time of segregation. So Little Rock director Celesta Hollingsworth in 1973 suggested that Oakland and Fraternal boards combine to knock down the separate but equal phase. And he said, if we're going to maintain the cemeteries equally, it is best that there be only one board. So that's where Rhonda and I come in. We sit on that board of 11 people to govern the cemetery park. So you hear Oakland and Fraternal Historic Cemetery Park, but Fraternal is separate. So when we bury, you're either going to be buried in Fraternal or you're going to be buried in Oakland. And I noticed for Rhonda get a lot of questions because it says Oakland and Fraternal, but you got to know which one.
Right. And the fact that they're together, they're combined in name and in sources, is interesting and is good, because many times you will find any race buried in any cemetery. It depends on what's going on. But the rules and regulations of segregation made us believe that there was definitely a line, nobody Black could be buried in Oakland and nobody white in Fraternal. That's not necessarily true.
Not for Oakland.
And in many cemeteries, you will find both races, all races, or whoever's in that community. So it's important to know the cemeteries. It's important to see who's in those cemeteries and the history. For Fraternal is personal for me. It's why I joined the board. And I'm not a group joiner, but they talked me into this one, and I've been there for a while. If you have not considered working with our city on any of the boards, please consider it, because it is engaging and it gives back to you. Just working with this board, I've been able to document so much more about my family. I'm from the Toombs family here in Little Rock. We've been here a long time. A lot of the community history we've been involved in. But walking through that cemetery, Fraternal Cemetery, and noticing the headstone, these are people that were friends of my family members. They were hanging out with my family members, maybe working with my family members. And when you go into a cemetery and you see those connections family connections, friends. You start thinking about it. Even to this day, I'm connected to some of the same names that were buried in fraternal around the same time as some of my ancestors. So that connection, that family connection, that community connection lives long past the burial. So when you go through a cemetery, understand who you are and who your folks may have been connected to, and watch that cemetery to see if they're not hanging out in the same spot plot wise.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So on this slide, it's just a little to get the identification. Sometimes it's, as Rhonda and I have been talking about it, it's a confusion that the park is just, it is one park, but we still have separate cemeteries. So Oakland and Fraternal Historic Cemetery Park. Now a park means more than one cemetery. Also known as, that's what it's been said, also known as Fraternal Cemetery, Oakland Cemetery. Fraternal Cemetery is separated by Barber Street, and it is to the west of, it is on the west side, but it's south of 21st Street, right? And then it has, so its office or sexton's office, the caretaker is across the street at the Oakland Cemetery. So on 2101 Barber Street, we have a phone number. The sexton is always on call. Now that's the office number, but he also has a cell number. And then Oakland and Fraternal and the other cemeteries are governed by one board of 11 members appointed by the Little Rock City Board and Mayor. And this is something that Rhonda and I always come up, the board makes one decision, and our legal attorney for the city says, now hold up now, the city board gotta have a say in this. So it's engaging, like Rhonda said, and if you want change, you got to be the change. So I think that the members of the board see that, and that this is something that we want to do. So memorials of 23,394 added photographs on Find a Grave and other media sites. You can find them at the cemetery. So even though it says Oakland and Fraternal, where other sources started doing it long time ago, they combined it. So it's important that we share with you today that even though it says Oakland and Fraternal, it's got to be either or.
Right.
But now there are African American or Black graves in Oakland, and they have been there since the 1860s, early 1800s. Yeah. Or what, mid
1800s.
Okay. So these are some of the things that you'll find. And then memorial photography numbers by volunteers includes all cemeteries in the park.
Also, Ancestry and Family Search have the databases for the burials in Oakland and Fraternal Cemetery. So if you use either of those databases, which hopefully you do through our library, look for, even if you just put in Fraternal, it's going to bring up the whole list, Oakland and Fraternal Cemetery. And there are all kinds of records, like sexton records from before time. I have to say a lot of fraternal records have been lost, but you can recreate some of those by going through old newspapers like newspapers.com, where they list the burials and they name the burial sites. There are some records online. The death certificates usually have place of burial listed on them. So if you just go to the state of Arkansas's death certificates that are available through Ancestry, it will tell you which cemetery a person was buried at. So there are all kinds of ways to find out who's where, which side of the street they're buried on, and what's going on with that.
So do y'all have obituaries here at the Butler Center?
There are some obituaries that we've collected that are the programs that were passed out at specific funerals. There are also obituaries, again, you can browse through the newspapers and find obituaries. We have what some people used to call the newspaper morgue, which is we call it vertical files, which is a collection of information on various individuals in the state of Arkansas. So we may even have obituaries in any of those files. And so just come into the center and we can browse what we have. And we may already have a copy of the obituary that you're looking for, or we may be able to help you find that copy.
So what Rhonda and I are saying, you have to be good detectives, and all those funeral programs or obituaries, don't throw them away. Bring them to Rhonda Stewart so they can be here for other people to research.
Yeah, and if you're African American, we have a large collection of African American programs that were donated by Archie Moore, who's deceased now, but he was a local historian that collected quite a bit of information, and his collection is here. And if you go to arstudies.org, and you can kind of browse our catalog to see exactly what we have. And there's a good chance you may be able to see some of that stuff because a lot of it is being digitized.
And we have a lot of them at the Arkansas State Archives. People have been donating, and then family reunion books. So those are other resources that you can find. And even in the obituary, it may not tell you where they're buried, but it tells you where they're buried. Like the cemetery may not give you the site. Yeah. So this is the entrance of Oakland Cemetery. So Oakland and Fraternal, by them being across the street from each other, Oakland is much larger, and it has a larger acre space. So this is the entrance of, and it was established in 1863.
Another reason to visit the cemeteries is just to look at the stonework that's done in each cemetery.
Absolutely.
And if you do a little research, you find out some of the best tradesmen in the state helped to create what we see at the entrance of both of these cemeteries.
Right. Yeah, just come out. Cemeteries aren't scary. There are no ghosts. I think that's all in your mind. But you can talk to those beautiful stones. I mean, it is beauty in a cemetery, and the architecture. So your art classes and the, what is it, arboretum? If you like
Arboretum.
yeah, that word.
You can do bird watching in the cemetery also.
You can do bird watching, yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, there's lots to see. Oakland Historic Cemetery was established in 1862 when the city of Little Rock purchased a 160-acre estate in order to accommodate the Civil War dead. Through the years, this 160-acre estate has been carved into 7 distinct cemeteries. Read it.
Oakland National is an 11-acre Confederate, a 1-acre Confederate, 11-acre Confederate, a 1-acre Confederate, Fraternal, Jewish, Oakland, and Akin designated color burial sections on Oakland grounds as stated in record books. And there's an Encyclopedia of Arkansas entry on the Oakland Fraternal Cemetery if you want to read a little bit more about the history. But it is our history. It is your history if you're in Pulaski County, basically. Right. So even if you're not specific to anyone buried there, if you don't know that you have a relative there, I know people that have come into the center and discovered they have people buried in either one of these cemeteries. So it's good just to browse. But no matter what your interest, again, like I say, if it's nature or if it's water conservation, there's a stream that runs through the cemetery. So there's always something you can do in the cemetery. And if you're really, really interested in trees or collecting dead wood for your fireplace this winter, check with the sexton. You may have some down trees down there. And instead of going out and purchasing that large package from whatever lobby store you go to, if you wanted to do a little work, you may be able to cut up one of the fallen trees at a cemetery.
That's right. And get free wood.
Exactly. All you got to do is put in a little labor.
All right, so these are examples of why we should commemorate. Just because we have broken, fallen markers and lost information. Now, the Royal Circle of Friends, it has the lion, it has a circle, the lion, and it has RCF. So you see, this one has fallen over, and most of them are marble or sandstone. So it's important that we when we use our lawnmowers and stuff, that we don't knock them over. And then the one to the right, heavy equipment, big animals, or human damage. So, we see a lot of reports about people going into cemeteries.
Yeah,
and
I don't understand
destroying.
that because
I don't either.
the purpose of a cemetery is to preserve the knowledge of a person's life. And so if you're mean enough to go into a cemetery and destroy it just because you can, then maybe you ought to think about your own life and how you want somebody to commemorate your life.
Right.
But the thing is, we don't own the cemetery. It belongs to all of us.
That's right.
So if each of us takes interest in what's happening in the cemetery, it's better for all of us that we'll go in and record these names or research these people or discover that we're related to somebody famous or not so famous.
Yeah, I think I'd like to say that they're all famous and they all have a history, even if it was my
Right.
neighbor.
Because they got us here.
That's right. So the next marker, and it's on the ground. And sometimes when they're on the ground, if we just cut around it, it leaves it protected. That's what we've learned in cemetery, the headstone preservation, right? We've had guys to come from other states, North New England states, and Rusty from Texas that will come and train and teach you about how to preserve your markers, because there's a lot of history. Molly Holmes, she was 49 years old. And so that's what happened. And that's all it says, that Molly B Holmes, 49. So we don't know what year or anything, but we can always go to the census. Now, the one on the right is Mosaic Templars of America headstones. And the cedar tree, I imagine it's a cedar, has taken over. And so it's there. But it's a lot of information that we could go back to the census and other repositories to find out information on these people.
Mifflin Swisster Gibbs, April 17th, 1823 through July 11th, 1915, born in Philadelphia, died 1518 Chester Street in Little Rock, Arkansas. Fraternal Cemetery, businessman, lawyer, judge, diplomat, banker, real estate agent. Gibbs Elementary School namesake. Mr. Gibbs did quite a bit in Arkansas. He actually, when he moved to Arkansas the first time, he had a newspaper, of course, and then he left and went to California for a little while. Then he came back to Arkansas. And so we must be a pretty good place for him to want to stay here. He was also ambassador to the nation, Madagascar. Yeah. So this guy was doing a whole lot from Little Rock, Arkansas, having been born in Philadelphia and then come down here during the time period that he lived.
And his house is still there,
Yeah.
1518 Chester, that at least you can see a physical presence of his.
Right.
And then everybody knows about Bush, John Edward Bush, John E. Bush, 1856, 1916, born in Moscow, Tennessee, died in Little Rock, Arkansas. He's buried in Fraternal. He was a school teacher, principal. In 1884, he ran for city clerk, railway, postal clerk. He owned and traded in real estate, Little Rock, and he was a co-organizer of the Mosaic Templars of America.
And we still have a lot of history concerning the Bush family and their contributions to the city of Little Rock.
Right.
Clara Richmond, 1878 through 1916, Magnolia Chapter, 140, MTMA, 18 years of chief clerk to the National Grand Scribe. So the Masonic orders are well represented in every cemetery. And if you are inclined to participate in a Masonic order today, check and see if your heritage is with that same organization or something like it.
Yeah, I never, until I did research and started getting into these cemeteries, I didn't know that my family had a long line of being involved with the Masonic order, and they were ministers, and most Masonic orders, these were your principals, your teachers, and your community leaders. They had clout.
Yeah.
And then we have Reverend Joseph C. Crenshaw. Now, this was something I knew about Milton Crenshaw, but not much about his father. And it said that he was born in 1883, and he died in 1975, Mississippi County, Missouri.
Right.
Ethel P. Crenshaw was his wife, 1885 to 1984. Joseph and Ethel Pitts Crenshaw lived at 1914 Denison Street in Little Rock. The mother-in-law was L.V. Pitts, sisters-in-law, Eva Pitts, Grace Washington, and a son, Joseph Crenshaw Jr., sister L.V. Crenshaw, and then Dr. H.A. Powell was the uncle. 1516 Ringo is where the family was. Ella Oliver was the mother, and she was born in November 1853 in Missouri, and Isaac Albert, the father, December 1858, Mississippi County, Missouri. Joined the National NAACP in 1919 and established the Arkansas chapter, unsung hero of the Central High Crisis. And I know you already knew that, Rhonda. Yeah. And he served with Daisy Bates to bring about desegregation peacefully. And they also owned the Crenshaw Tailor Shop. Now, all of that was gathered off of the census, but we learn a lot about the Crenshaw family.
Right. And it's a family that definitely has an impact still to this day in Arkansas. There are young people learning how to fly because of Mr. Crenshaw, Milton Crenshaw, because of his contributions to the military and as a person who flew during the war. It's like the Crenshaw family is well known in the city of Little Rock. And even to this day, there are extended family members around that are contributing to the society that we live in today.
Yeah, absolutely. And my daddy's sister, Dr. Florence Hines Brown, got a chance to go up in the plane with Milton Crenshaw.
Well, that's a memory. John Marshall Robinson, Dr. John Marshall Robinson, MD, July 31st, 1879 through July 19th, 1970, born in Pickens, Mississippi. When you do your family history, you'll find some members of your family maybe from this particular county. Mississippi is one of the routes into Arkansas for people migrating, and one of 8 children of Amos G. and Isabel Marshall Robinson. He attended Russ College in Holly Springs, Mississippi, and graduated in 1904 from Meharry Medical College in Nashville. A prominent physician, civic leader, co-founder of the Arkansas Negro Democratic Association, performed pioneering surgery, involved with numerous medical institutions in Little Rock, Arkansas, co-founded the Pulaski County Medical, Dental, and Pharmaceutical Association with Dr. John G. Thornton of Little Rock. And Robinson and 3 other Black doctors founded Bush Memorial Hospital in 1918.
Now, that's a lot of good, rich Arkansas history.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
On the medical field.
On the medical field. And they recently nominated Dr. Thornton's house as a historic landmark. So, and Dr. Thornton also is buried in Fraternal Cemetery. So Thomas Abrams, Georgia, 1876, 1916. He was married to Lula Price, May 1898, the 30th of May in Little Rock, Arkansas. He lived with his mother, Ella, from Georgia, and brothers Willie. He was born in Georgia, and Charlie was born in Arkansas. They lived at 714 Ringo Street, and he was a Prince Hall Mason. And this information came from the 1900 census.
Isabella Sims, 1867 through 1917, Pride of Raleigh Springs, Chapter 2194, Little Rock, Arkansas.
Wait.
About her?
Yeah.
Oh, William Williams, I'm sorry, 1854 to 1901, Prince Hall Mason. And again, the Masonic orders were vital in sustaining life in the city of Little Rock and other places. They were our leaders, they were our community organizers, and they pushed us to do better along the way. And you don't have to be famous to be a part of this organization. It's everyday people.
That's right.
So if you're inclined to join a group, think about which group you want to join. And it may be one of these orders because you have family heritage there, or because you too want to contribute to the goodness of your society.
And if you look at the symbol, you see the Mosaic Templars has the circle with the what is it? MTA.
Yeah.
And then the Prince Hall Mason has the
Mathematical tool with
yeah.
the G in it.
right
I forget what it's called.
with the G in the middle.
Correct.
So yeah.
Dionysus, Knights and Daughters of Tabor, died 16th of March, 1916. The boy's name of Greek origin, god of Nysa, Greek god of wine, revelry, and fertility.
Now, isn't that something I
Yeah.
always wanted to know what that was? Because when I went in the cemetery and I looked down, like, what is this?
Yeah.
And then we have B.J. Jackson, born in Lynchburg, Virginia. So we're getting other information. The 20th of April, 1841, the 2nd of July, 1901. So here is Faith, Love, and Truth. This is the Odd Fellows Society and their symbol.
Peter Stevenson, July 18th, 1874 through December 30th, 1933. Lived at 1114 Bishop, that's over by where Children's Hospital is spread out now. Wife was Gracie Luella Sampson, 1900 military and naval population, age 25, birthplace Arkansas. Of course, his description, brown eyes, black hair, brown skin, military man. So find the military people in your family. And don't forget, even women served during World War II and in other places along the way, like the Civil War. So you may have a female military member in your family. So do the research, go to the cemetery, find the headstones if they exist. If they do not exist, you may want to think about placing a headstone in the cemetery for your ancestors. You may also want to purchase one of the street signs or whatever's available in the cemetery
Absolutely.
that you are visiting, because there are all kinds of ways to help a cemetery survive and thrive.
Dr. GW Hayman, 1865, December 25th, 1943. He lived at 1701 High Street. Now it's Martin Luther King Drive. He was born August in Arkansas, and both parents were born in, I guess it says Arkansas. His wife was Lily, son George, and his grandmother lived with them, a niece, Georgia Bagby. So we're getting a lot of names that were connected, right?
Yeah.
And George Hayman, and he was a physician. In 1880, they lived in Clay Township, Columbia County, Arkansas. And in the house was Joseph, 65, Eliza, 64, Morton. The grandparents lived in the house also, and in Pulaski County Medical Society, pioneering in physicians. And then this information came from Tom Dillard, who has done a lot of African-American research and published it. He graduated from Meharry Medical School, and this was a medical school for Blacks. Was nominated to the Federal Pension Examining Board, but not appointed. July 8th, 1913, Negro Infirmary and Training School was opened by Dr. Hayman. 1911, he contracted for a 3-story business on High Street. 1903, the Colored Men's Business League of Arkansas, he was the secretary. And then Philander Smith College faculty lecturer in
Physiology and hygiene.
Thank you. Physiology and hygiene.
United States Colored Infantry, 1839, 1879. Anderson Lewis Rush. So,
And this is in Oakland Cemetery, but it's an African-American that was a legislator during Reconstruction. Absolutely.
we're running short on time.
Okay, so this is our final slide. We're going to close here with this one, but the Black History Commission of Arkansas had this monument because a lot of the legislators do not have, they're not cited. So we gathered this information and we had this put in Oakland Cemetery.
Anderson Lewis
Rush.
And if you're looking to preserve something or to enhance something in a cemetery, look for the grant money out there, because there's grant money available to do certain projects.
Absolutely.
Whether it's a small cemetery or a large cemetery, or the closest cemetery to your house, and you want to improve or influence some of the outcome of the look of the cemetery. You may want to write a grant, and the Arkansas Humanities Council, the Arkansas State Archives with the Black History Commission, especially Curtis L. Sykes grant. There's money out there to help you do what you need to do. If you wanted to document a certain individual in the cemetery or place a headstone for that individual in the cemetery, there is grant money available, and you are able to apply for that and hopefully get some help. Just do a public probe, and if you got enough research you gathered, consider depositing that research with one of your local archives, like the Butler Center for Arkansas Studies.
That's right, because there's no history until you compile it, get it together, and give it to the Butler Center or the Arkansas State Archives.
And most historians write about what they're interested in. So if it's of interest to you, write about it, confirm it, document it, and submit it to some entity to preserve that history.
Absolutely.
Whether it's the County Historical Journal in your location, or the State Historical Journal, or just a book you wrote, preserve the history.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Y'all need a podcast or radio show, or
We don't do this often.
I've talked to you, obviously, I mean, I've talked to you both for years, individually and maybe together, but that was magical. You've got comments in here like y'all are superstars, and yeah, y'all need to, that was brilliant. The way you finished each other's sentences. So
We've been hanging out a long time.
Try to compliment
Carla makes
each other.
me work.
And I hope somebody's learned something today.
I think so, definitely. And this is going to go up on YouTube so people can keep learning and keep learning. Something you said early on that really resonated for me is our family tends to go to cemeteries on vacation. So you may be going to that place and going to the museum, but don't forget to check out the cemetery too.
Absolutely.
There is, and there's nothing better than letting your child out into this park that can run a little bit, like be respectful, but they can get some energy out there and be around history. So yeah, we have lots of pictures of family vacations pre-COVID where we would go to cemeteries because it was a place to go. And you're right, the markers are beautiful. I mean, this is craftsmanship. This is not, they are just so beautiful. And the mosaic Templar stones, when I worked there, my husband used to say that going 65 miles an hour down a 2-lane road, I know you're only supposed to go 55, I could point out a mosaic Templar's headstone going.
We do it all the time.
You can just, like, you look and go, there's one right there.
There's one.
It has that arch coming down, and the stone is the right size. And yes. So, so yeah, get out and get to your cemeteries, go to Oakland Fraternal, go to your cemetery. And it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a lot of cemeteries all over the state, little cemeteries. And it's my understanding that the landowner has to give you access. You have to be able to access those, correct?
Yes, that's correct. That is state law. But if you don't know the law, and you can find it online, but if you don't know the law, you're ignorant to the law, then you lose access. Or but a lot of families now are going to the landowner, going to the judge, going to the mayor for access, because the farmers will dig ditches and trenches to keep you out.
Yeah.
But honor the dead is the whole thing.
It is.
You must honor the dead to keep living.
Yes. So, can y'all talk about what's going on with Haven of Rest?
Oh,
I don't know a lot about Haven of Rest other than it looks a lot better than it did a few years ago.
Yeah.
They are doing improvements over there. It also has quite a bit of history.
It does.
In Haven of Rest, it's one of the first in the western expansion of the city of Little Rock. It's right behind University Park area. So it was in an industrial area originally, I guess, or at the outskirts of the city, because it was Hayes Street, not university at the time. But it's, again, a lot of history. I have family members there also. When you come from a large family, you will find them spread out all over the county that you live in sometimes.
And they buried close to wherever they lived.
Right.
And Stephanie and Percy Webb were the owners, but we recently lost Stephanie. And we just want everybody to lift up and offer up a prayer for Percy. And we just hope that they get back on their feet. But, after this, because there's so much going on. But yeah, like Rhonda said, it's a lot of history there. And they've got the roads and a nice gate. And like Rhonda said, you can always go and volunteer. And we like to complain. But instead of complaining, sometimes just go and weed eat.
Yeah.
Grass cut, do something.
Or just go speak to the people in the cemetery. It's what I do sometimes. I drive down the street and the cemetery where my mother is buried is Roselawn. And so every day I have to go down either Wright Avenue or Roosevelt. And I have relatives on the Roosevelt side and I have relatives on the Wright Avenue side. So I always throw in my hand and say, hey, y'all, just driving down the street.
Hey, Lou.
We do. We have some, obviously Oakland Fraternal is a wonderful cemetery, and Mount Holly gets a lot of credit, but there is
several
and
several dignitaries buried in the city of Little Rock.
Yeah.
Right. And we have senators, we have federal officials,
Judges, all kinds of
that's buried in Oakland. I told the mayor that we're a jewel and you're building on Little Rock. So when tourists come in, they're going to come. You get a trolley, or really it's within walking distance or a bicycle. And we just got new roads. Yeah. So it's not that bumpy stuff. That's right. And so it's welcoming. And that's the way we like to have it.
Yeah. That's great. Well, thank you both so much for doing this. This really, that was super entertaining.
Well, thank you.
I've heard the talk a couple of times. So it was super entertaining. It's always entertaining, but this time it was super entertaining.
Well, good.
But yes, thank you both. And next month.
Invite me, Carla.
Thank you for having me, Rhonda. My other favorite person, Holly Hope. Mm-hmm. And Holly Dixon.
Well, and if you have questions about saving a cemetery, you can also talk to the folks at the Arkansas Historic Preservation Program, and they can give you some information and some help on saving it. Because
PAC, Preservation of African American Cemeteries. Mm-hmm. That's another avenue that. Even though we say preservation of African American cemeteries, it's all cemeteries. Yeah. And there's one in Jacksonville. It's one cemetery, Jackson Cemetery, but there is a tree line. So you know that the church people are buried over here, and then, So it's very, very interesting. And then don't go by yourself, because you always want to have. Be safe. If you fall in, who's going to help you?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Stung by me.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Next month, we have Sean Fitzgibbons, and he's going to talk just in time for Halloween. He's going to talk about his new graphic novel, or his new forthcoming graphic novel about the spookiness of the Crescent Hotel in Eureka Springs.
Oh.
So everybody come back next month, and we will be virtual again. I think probably. I don't see it changing.
It's okay.
It's okay.
We're adjusting.
Yes,
we are adjusting. We are.
This is the new way to communicate now.
It is. It is the new way. So, thanks everybody, and have a great day.
Bye.